All right, welcome everyone. This is Tim Minnick. I'm the principal and founder of Whitetail Forensics, and welcome to the third episode of our Inspiration Friday series. And I'm joined by a friend of mine today, one of my WTFCAMO field representatives, Kevin Stowell. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Tim. Thanks for talking with me. I appreciate it. My name's Kevin Stowell, Sr. My wife and son and I live in North Carolina, and I'm the co-host for Fawcett Outdoors. Small group that we're trying to get off the ground, but hopefully we can figure it out. But outdoors is my passion, and I'm just grateful to be able to share with people what the outdoors has been able to do for me over the years. So,
fantastic, and thanks for taking the time today. And whenever you and Michael Fawcett first approached me, and we talked about it last year when I was kind of getting started up and just starting to have people express interest in representing my camo, Michael kind of set it up with you, me, and him, and I was really struck in our very first phone call. I don't even know if we were 5 or 6 minutes into the phone call. When you introduced yourself, you told me you were recovering alcoholic, recovering addict, and 15 years sober. And, that came up pretty quick in that conversation. And I remember thinking, it's really interesting that you brought that up, and that you must be proud of the person you are today to immediately share kind of a little bit about where you came from in the background. So today we're going to talk a little about your journey, and in kind of some of our discussions leading up to this, part of my goal is to help inspire others, and others don't have to be going through the exact same problems that you've gone through, but other people certainly have challenges, and I think some parallels in their lives with some of what you face. So let's talk about kind of do this in 3 segments today. Kind of the addiction part, the recovery part, and then kind of post-recovery and the healing and the outdoors and what that does for you. So we'll kind of divide it into 3 sections. So, one of the things you were very willing, when I asked you for some pictures of kind of the outdoors, one of the things that you were very willing to say is like, hey, I got some mug shots too. And you sent those to me, and we're going to share that up here for a moment. And let's talk about the journey to get you to what required these shots. And that is not the same guy I know. That is for sure. Looking at that picture, even right now, the smile and the laughing on your face, that is not a happy guy in that picture. So tell me a little bit about kind of how it started and the journey that got you kind of to that point.
My gosh. The journey for me, I think, was believing all the negativity that I heard about myself that wasn't true. I think that blaming somebody for where my life led me is probably the absolute wrong thing to do. As growing up, you kind of learn how to function within that small cellular group of family, and if you learn how to function in that, and sometimes those places are very toxic, and they're not very nurturing, and so you learn how to survive. Pardon me, and that's really what I had done, and I hadn't learned anything of like tangible value when it comes to interacting with people. And so I had a lot of grandiosity when it came to thoughts and relationships and how to interact with people instead of just being who I am, kind of like our conversation with you, myself, and Mike. Uh, I'm just I'm comfortable in my own skin today. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do business with me, I want you to know first and foremost, hey, there were skeletons in my closet. And, I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic, and I wasn't a church boy my whole life.
Right.
And, I don't want you to, um, I don't want you to see this great facade and then somebody come up to you and 2 or 3 years and why are you doing business with that guy? Um, and you can say because that guy that I'm doing business with isn't that guy in the mugshot that I just showed. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I was ill adapted and ill equipped to face life the way that a lot of people are able to, um, in a nurturing and caring environment.
Hmm.
That's not an excuse. I don't want it to be an excuse, and I'm not blaming anybody because once I turned 17 and I graduated high school, guess what? I made my own choices,
Sure.
so that's on me. So, but there were a lot of things that I chose to do that instead of learning how to do it correctly, I just kind of went with the way that it used to be, and what I knew and what was comfortable. So,
Yeah. And, one of the things when you've been, I guess it's 16 years now that you've been, and when you look back, you talk about how you're not the same guy you used to be. And when we look at a picture like this, which you sent me, which was another mugshot, how do you look back at that guy? What do you think about when you look back at who that guy was?
I look at that guy and I know I hated the world, I hated my life, I hated everything. I hated God. I blamed everybody and everything I could possibly think of as to why my life was a pile of garbage and just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it just I was so at that point I was so ingrained in blaming everybody else that it was poor me and poor me and poor me and I might as well just drink because I can't feel any better. I might as well get high because I can't feel any better. And this is who I was. I mean, it was a vicious cycle. I didn't see my life uh, without alcohol. I'd never been that way without alcohol or drugs,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know any other way. And it was a vicious, almost self-prophesizing cycle of drink, go to jail, or go to
Mm-hmm.
go to a hospital, end up dead. There were many times in my career at that point that I wished I would die, and I tried to kill
Mm-hmm.
myself on multiple occasions. Um, but that just shows you how sometimes we have an idea and God has a different idea, and we don't ever know what that is. And God can look like the trees and the plants and the earth, and or God can
Mm-hmm.
look like a saving angel. I mean, it just depends on what we choose that God to be. But He had a better, bigger plan for me, I guess.
Yeah,
So.
and there's so many people that deal with addiction and deal with challenges like that. What actually brought you to the point of recovery? What got you to finally make that commitment? Was it up and down? What got you to the point where you decided you wanted a different life?
Um, So I've been to like detox before. I've been to AA meetings and inpatient treatment, and a lot of it was to kind of appease other people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a point in my life where I almost did something that was irrevocable, and God saved me from that moment, and it still took me a week to get into detox and in treatment. But that was the one catalyst that propelled me. There's got to be a different way of living my life. There's a lot of things that I said I would never do and in my life, and I would say, well, okay, I did that, but that's okay. Well, I did that, but that's okay. And I would justify it, but this never was the, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not the way I want to live my life.
Yeah. And, from the outside looking in, I think it's easy for people that aren't involved in addiction to say, how could you not want to move forward with a different life? How could you not want to make that change? But I think what we sometimes don't have a good grasp on is what you're going through in the throes of addiction, what your thought process is. And when you made the choice to kind of move forward to recovery, there's got to be things that you almost felt you lost too by no longer being an addict. I mean, what was that transition like, going from one side of the fence to the other?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you asked that particular question, Tim, because being in addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs, it's a very, very toxic relationship between myself and the drugs and alcohol. And there's a comfort there of knowing I can escape there. I can do this stuff. And it always solved my problems. Whether it solved them very well is, beyond the, I mean, that, but, it's like being in a long-term relationship with a spouse or a parent and losing them for the rest of your life. And I went through the same grieving process that I would if I lost someone that was really close to me. That's really, and I think a lot of people now, because of what I do now, it sounds like it's crazy because I'm grieving because I don't have the booze or I don't have the drugs, but I miss them. I don't miss the lifestyle. I don't miss how I felt, but I miss them, so to speak. And it's a very, very normal feeling to go through the grieving process. And, it's really weird. It's hard to explain, but I mean, that's probably the closest way that I've found that people who don't understand and don't have never been in the throes of addiction, why they keep going back, and it's just it's a horrible cycle. It's just, I mean, that's really all I can say is that it's a horrible cycle.
Yeah, and I mean, you even see it with something that like cigarette smoking. And like my dad smoked until he was a little over 40 years old. But when he would have his cigarettes, when he'd smoke a pipe when we were out looking for Indian artifacts, and then when we'd be walking up the trail to our deer blinds, he would smoke. So even though he was quitting smoking, a lot of times that act of smoking wasn't just sitting on the chair in the living room. It was through something that he actually really enjoyed. And it was decades before he stopped reaching over on his shirt pocket instinctively where the cigarettes used to be. And I think, well, if it's like that for cigarettes, it's got to be that much harder for even more addictive substances to kind of break away from that relationship where the substances were tied to activities, tied to things that you did, tied to sometimes things that you might have enjoyed doing. And realizing, as you said, you're kind of breaking up a relationship and breaking up a routine. And how do you move beyond that, though? How do you make that separation permanent?
So,
excuse me.
With addiction, with illicit drugs and alcohol, there's also a chemical component that goes along with that, with the serotonin and the dopamine in the brain. So that causes a natural chemical imbalance in the brain as well. And so you've got that chemical imbalance that you're dealing with, and then you have the emotional imbalance that you're dealing with. And it's just finding natural supports is really the absolute biggest key. And natural supports can be people that don't even understand what addiction is, but they're supporting you in the positive development of what somebody's doing, trying to break that cycle. It's finding people that have walked that path, and I've got plenty of friends that I can call right now and go, listen, this is, I think I'm going crazy, but, and they'll be like, no, that's really normal. And it's really particularly important early in recovery and early in sobriety that, you start to develop those things, because part of that is your addiction trying to talk back to you to get you to go back to where you were at, and I tell this to people that I work with, that the addiction has a life of its own. It doesn't want to die. It wants to survive. But if it survives in you, it's going to kill you and it's going to die.
Wow.
So, and that's the battle. And so when we talk about addiction, we have to be understanding that nobody's perfect, and all we really have is today. And the 12-step meetings, they like to talk about just today, just for today, just for today. And yeah, that's great, but I mean, life goes on, right?
Right.
And there's things that I have to plan for. I have to plan for my son's school. I have to plan for Christmas, or for our vacation, or whatever. Life is continually coming at me, and I can't just focus on the 24 hours that I have in front of me. I can be grateful for the minutes that I'm experiencing in that 24 hours, which is very important. But just learning how to live. I was talking with a colleague, and I think the best approach when we're talking about someone who is starting to overcome that addiction, their maturity level is going to be when they first started using. So if, like for me, my first drunk, I probably was 10 years old. So my
Hmm.
maturity level, when I finally, everything, the fog started to lift, I stopped drinking, I did my detox, I'm going to rehab. I'm at probably a maturity level of like 11-ish,
Hmm.
you know, in a 37-year-old man's body.
It's a
And
really,
so,
really, that's a really, let me just stop there for a second. So that's a really interesting perspective. So what you're sharing is that when through addiction, you're not really maturing at the same level because is it because you're not taking responsibility for things? You don't look at life the same way around you? Is it like what leads to that kind of stagnation somewhat of personal growth? Is it a lot of different things that cause that? Excuse me.
I mean, to just really be frank about it, and the first thing that pops into my head is that when I'm in the throes of addiction, um, I tell myself I can handle this, I can do this, I can do this, but in actuality, nothing ever gets done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what it is. It's a fantasy world that we're living in, but it's the real world. You follow me?
I do. I do. Yeah.
And so it's just it's kind of like the land of make believe. That it's probably the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way that I can describe addiction for people to understand. The brain just stops dealing with reality.
So whenever you're coming out of addiction and in recovery, how do how do you help people face that reality that you may not be exactly where you need to be from a personal responsibility maturity level? How do you help people understand, hey, you're going to be overwhelmed because, you know, you're not, you gave up a lot of years and you're kind of not where you need to be for your age. How do you help people prepare for that?
Well, honestly, it's really easy because I'm pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But but you know, so go back to when I got sober, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody told me this. I didn't understand this. I thought I was going absolutely flipping crazy,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not understanding why I'm not able to function in either life, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm fresh in recovery and I'm not able to function in the addictive lifestyle anymore, obviously, right? But I don't have the capabilities of functioning in this sober lifestyle. And so you kind of figure it out, you know, like, okay, well, I got to pay my bills. Whoops, I screwed that up. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really like that because nobody told me. And I found that when I tell people that's normal, they're like, wow, really? And it's like a
Yeah.
huge weight is lifted off of their shoulders. It's
I know we're
normal.
talking. I know we're talking about when you tell people. Talk about what you've been doing as a career. Maybe that'll help put some context as you've been talking about this. Talk about what you had been doing.
So I have over the last 4 years, I have been working with people in the throes of addiction and criminal justice involvement. I've been at the capacity of a peer support specialist as well as a certified alcohol and drug counselor. And so there's certain boundaries that I have to follow as a drug and alcohol counselor that I don't have to follow as a peer support because I can self-disclose. I can be pretty much open to, you know, hey, this is the path that I walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a drug and alcohol counselor, it's kind of, I can identify with you. I understand. And, you know, and when somebody throws, well, what do you know? Well, you know, I'm in recovery as well. So I can say that and they're like, oh, okay, he does understand. He gets it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I learned in a book. It's something I learned through trial and error.
Something that you had told me, and actually we had one of our River House PA events today for our veterans, and we work specifically with veterans that struggle with PTSD, and many of them have been in the throes of addiction and recovery from alcoholism, things that are very common with those that struggle with PTSD. And I shared with one of the veterans something you said that really struck me, which was that, when you kind of go through the program and you get to kind of the make amends section, you talked about how the expectation of making amends, that not everybody actually has the capacity to forgive when you're seeking forgiveness. Talk a little bit about that, because that's got to be, I would think that'd be something that having that expectation would really derail a lot of people's recovery. But talk a little bit about that.
And that's a good point. It really does. So when I went through and continue to go through making amends, because I'm human and I fail epically, but my responsibility when it's my amends, my responsibility is for me to give it, and that's where it ends. If they accept it, fantastic. If they don't, fantastic. The amends that I'm giving is to help me heal and help me not carry that guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be able to change someone else's perspective. For an example, I mean, there are people in my life, my immediate family, and I think you and I talked about this yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There's immediate family that still, when you bring up that mugshot, that's the guy that they see. That's the guy
Sure.
that they think about. That's the guy that they're trying to hold accountable. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do to change that. I have to accept it. That's where they're at today. And I love them all the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to allow them to be in my life and allow them to be toxic when I'm trying to be healthy. Because we're not bad people. People in addiction are not intrinsically bad people. We are sick people, and we're trying to get better.
Sure.
So, I mean.
And I remember you shared with me, kind of back when we talked a year ago about this, you kind of talked about really two segments of your life. A segment with kind of a family and friends from before, and then a post-recovery and a whole different life and a family and marriage and child and such. And having that opportunity, how do you help others have hope? I mean, I'm going to share a picture here. First of all, let's talk about how you. Oops, what did I do? I might have shut that down. All right, I got to find this again. Here we go. Let me see if I could share this, because I want to ask you a specific question. Here we go. All right. I love this picture. It's hilarious. But let's talk a little bit about kind of the second half of your life and where life began post-addiction, and meeting Megan and how you obviously, and we're going to share some more pictures of you and your family, but how do you have hope for yourself post-addiction, and how do you help others kind of see that they also have an opportunity to have hope and have a better life, and not have to just constantly look for everything and look at everything that was in the past?
Oh, geez. It's a long question.
It's a biggie.
Yeah, it is. It is very deep. So I'm gonna address the first one or the second one first, because I don't have to share very much of my story, my using story, for people to understand that it wasn't too long ago that I was sitting on the other side of the desk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they know that I care, because I was watching it. It was really weird because I was watching a podcast before this, and it's like the speaker was talking about, look at the positives of the addiction, and I'm like, look, I was there. There weren't very many positives, but they did point out that those people had not abandoned the clients that were in addiction. And so it's a huge deal, is because when people look at me and people talk to me, they know that I'm not giving up on them. Now, there's certain things that I have to do for my own health and my own safety, but I'm not giving up on them. I believe in them. I've been working with a young man for over a year now, and he's finally gotten 90 plus days clean and sober. And,
Wow.
I have to meet them where they're at, but love them for who they are. And they know that I do. I'm firm with them. I'm honest with them. And I tell them, if you want me to tell you what you want to hear, I'm the wrong guy to do that. I won't lie to you. I promise that. But I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. But kind of like our conversation a year ago, Tim, my wife, several years younger than me, we sat down on my couch, not actually too far, it's about 3 hours from where our house is right now. It's weird. But we sat down on my couch, and I said, listen, if you're going to be in a relationship with me, I need you to absolutely know the good and the bad. I don't want you going into this. I need you to I need you to know everything that I've done, everything that I've gone through. I don't want to mislead you. And if I'm blessed enough with my son that he turns out more like his mom than his dad, I will be ecstatic, because and I've even told my in-laws that she is probably the best person in the world. Sometimes not the nicest, but I mean.
Well, she's not going to come in and smack you while you're on a podcast.
Well, I had to look over my shoulder.
You can say that. You can say that because she's not going to hop on camera and smack you for that one.
She'll get me later, but
yeah.
But I mean, it's. I don't want to say if I can do it, anybody can do it. Because what works for me could probably kill somebody else. And what works for somebody else could probably kill me. Their own path of recovery. But I want them to know is whatever path that they're on and that they go, I'm there and I support them 100%. Because that way they know that they're able to do those things. It's like letting my son learn how to walk. I mean, how many times did he fall down before he learned how to walk?
Right.
So
yeah, I'm gonna pull up a few other photos here, because one of the things that's just so striking to me is, when you sent me those mug shots and and looking at those, and then looking at, you here on camera and some of these shots of you in the outdoors and with your son, and you're like smiling and happy in every single shot. And, you're obviously a very blessed guy with your family. And where did kind of the passion for the outdoors come? I love that you both kind of have the same same wide mouth appreciation. There, I'll stop at that one for a moment. Come back, but when and how did the appreciation for the outdoors start, and hunting and fishing, and really um, developing that passion?
So it's really weird. I mean, I did some fishing, and I did with my uncle, and I did some hunting. My uncle Jeff got me into bow hunting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just kind of, it's there to do. It was good quality time, and I didn't really start enjoying the outdoors until after I got out of rehab and was able to reconnect with the family that accepts me, that I'm human, and that understands that I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing the best that I can now, trying not to be that person that I was. Um, but I think what I really liked and what drew me back to the woods was the peacefulness, my time with God.
Mm-hmm.
I I've sat in my tree stand and thank God for a lot of my blessings, and and I've sat in my tree stand and I've been mad at God, and it's just the watching the sunrise. Not everybody gets to see that unadulterated that
Mm-hmm.
view. Whether you're out on the lake or you're up in a tree, 20 feet. It's just very awe-inspiring to know that we are just a small part of this huge universe, and it's really kicked in in my sobriety. So
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned kind of God and faith a couple times, and you mentioned when you were young you're kind of angry with God. When and how did faith really come to play a more significant part in your life?
I mean, with the spiritual side uh, of life, it's an ever evolving thing with me.
Mm-hmm.
I started believing in God because I had to, because there was no other way I was going to get sober. Uh, um, my faith, I question my belief and how much trust I give God from time to time, and I think everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that if He's been able to do what I was unable to do, which is turn me into a sober, loving person, where I thought my son was going to fall off the porch, so I'm sorry. It's like right out my window.
Dad, always a dad first.
Sorry.
That's fine.
What's really bad is my wife is sitting there, so I mean, it's just I can't help it.
That's funny.
But my spirituality, my belief is that if God is capable of removing the desire, because I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, in October it'll be 16 years that I've been clean and sober,
Mm-hmm.
God willing. And I cannot think of a time, with the exception of when I was 7 months sober, from that point until today, I cannot think of a time that I've had a craving, an urge to get high or drunk.
Wow.
Not once. And I'm not saying that because I'm impervious. I'm saying that because it's literally been removed from me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the one thing that screams out to me to answer your question is I read my Bible every day,
Mm-hmm.
and it says something to the effect of deny me in front of man and I'll deny you in front of my Father. Well, God believes in me enough to keep me this way, so I absolutely have to believe in God and Jesus Christ, who died for me
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else. And
Sure.
I probably don't have the faith that some have, as strong or as weak. I try every day to make it stronger, you know?
Yeah. In talking about faith and talking about forgiveness, one of the challenges I see, and I was reading again through some stories of veterans in a book called Walking Toward Peace, which the founder of our River House PA wrote. And one of the common themes with a lot of these veterans is an inability to forgive themselves. So even though, knowing you can gain forgiveness through God, how do you reconcile and how do you help others forgive themselves, which seems to be such a challenge sometimes. They know they even when others forgive them, the capacity to forgive themselves. How do you deal with that? How do you help others deal with that?
Well, I mean, kind of like survivor's remorse is really
Mm-hmm.
what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the short and quick of it is I'm not God. I don't decide who lives and dies.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't pretend to know what purpose God has for me other than I need to just keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in that time, it happens. It's veterans have a very rough, unique road to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Combat veterans even have a rougher, from my experience, because it's why didn't I? Why shouldn't I? Why? If we stay away from the why and the answer is I don't know. The forgiveness comes.
Yeah.
The forgiveness comes, I think, when we realize that, and we draw the line that we're not God,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I sometimes think, hey, with everything that I've done or with everything someone's done, if I hope people understand that God can forgive so easily. So, and God knows everything, even stuff other people don't know. And if God can forgive you for that, maybe it's time to forgive yourself, for what you've done. And, one of the things that, kind of you've really highlighted with me and when I think is that, sometimes, and I'm going to share some more pictures here while I'm talking, of this bright smiling guy here and having fun in the outdoors. And one of the things is that sometimes to me gets conflated is when people talk about God's will. and what is God's will. And, I don't look that it was God's will that you were an addict, but it can be God's will that with you coming out of addiction and making it through addiction and supporting you through addiction, that you can be used for something. And, as you said, you're kind of constantly trying to figure that out, constantly trying to figure out what is God's will for you. But I oftentimes, you'll hear sometimes when somebody say it was God's will when something bad happens to somebody. And I don't believe that. But I believe that when something happens, that a person can find purpose after that, and God can find purpose for that person afterwards. And that kind of fulfillment of God's will can be challenging, because sometimes you're looking at, okay, now I feel this responsibility. Now that I have faith, wow, now I feel a little bit of responsibility to do something with it. I just can't say, hey, thanks God, appreciate that forgiveness. Now it's like, geez, maybe I should do something with that. And it's constantly kind of figuring that out. And, for you, kind of family, a son, kind of what you've been doing to help others. Do you ever look at that as maybe you are fulfilling God's will without even realizing it, that you talked about being such a loving, God helped you become a loving person. I mean, that seems pretty much like that's a big fulfillment of what God's will would have been for you as part of recovering and helping to shine that light inside you.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna. I'm not. I'm. I know I've given you a lot of prophetic things over our conversations, Tim. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna give credit to this. I heard this on a reel, and it really actually it was just dumbfounding because lost a friend of mine last year. To my knowledge, no medical issues. 40 years old, wife, 3 children, 1 on the way, and just had a stroke and died. And I would call him to help me understand my faith more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I go back to that survivor's guilt, right? And why him? He was a great guy. He never did anything wrong. It was the exact opposite of me. And then I heard this reel, and it's not God's will, it's the human will, because God gave man free will.
Mm-hmm.
He gave us the ability to have free will. And if God materialized every single time that there was an issue, there was a problem, there was a disease, there was this, there was that, why would we need to turn to God for help? Sorry, my son is banging on my door. And again, I had to be dad.
It's okay. If he wants to come in and join this so everyone can meet him, that's fine.
Well, no, I looked at him and, well, I don't know. He might come in. But God's will for me, I think, is for me to stay open, honest, and for me to share my experience when somebody asks me to. And, to be a guide for my son, to be a husband to my wife, and God's will is pretty simple. I mean, it really is. It's love me and don't use my name in vain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty simple, right?
Yeah. And, when I asked you about doing this, you didn't hesitate. You said, one of the things my sponsor always said is if given the opportunity, anytime, anywhere, anyhow, tell your story. And, I really appreciate that. And, like I told you in the beginning, I had no questions written down. This is just kind of free flow. You never know where you're going to end up with this. But I actually did have a question as well. And because when you and others, and for you, it's almost 16 years, the term that everyone always uses is I am a recovering addict. I am a recovering alcoholic versus recovered. Is it why is it always referred to as recovering, no matter how long you're clean and sober?
So you corrected me. I am a recovered alcoholic.
Okay.
I am a recovered drug addict. So not to get on my soapbox.
Please. That's what this is for.
But I'm going to. Just like the Bible, when the AA Big Book was written back in 1939 and published and sent out, it said, we have recovered. Right? I mean, I could break it out. It's literally back there on the desk behind me, because I read it every day. We have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And people have decided to put their own opinions, their own thoughts, their own words, and what they feel is the appropriate thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Put their own spin on it. But if you break it down to its simplest form, it's very, very clear. This is what you need to do. This is how you do it. And back when that was what was done, there was a 50% success rate. And then an additional 25% would be added on after a couple of relapses. So that statistically is by far the highest recovery rate in the addiction process. But again, people put their own opinions, their own statements. I feel we need this, we need that, blah, blah, blah. They mailed the books out back in 1939. They didn't have telephones in every single house. They didn't have meetings on every street corner. And I think being able to say I have recovered is very important, because I was a real alcoholic. I was a real drug addict. And I live life like any normal person out there. I mean, I haven't been to meetings. I go to 2 or 3 a year to either as a speaking engagement or to get my annual chip, and that's it. My life does not revolve around meetings. My life revolves around life. My wife, my son, my job, my hunting, my fishing. But I'm always available if my phone rings. Somebody's drunk, need a ride, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll go get them. There's no judgment, no nothing. Or if they want to talk, or if they need detox, or whatever. It's not like being a doctor or a lawyer where you're always practicing law or medicine, right? You just continue to live life. But thank you for correcting me. I have recovered.
Yeah, I hear other people use the term recovering, regardless of how long they've been sober. And I was just curious, but I love that perspective you added on. But anything else that you would like to add to those out there that may be struggling or have a family member that's struggling, Any closing thoughts on your part?
Oh, jeez.
But let me ask, well, as you're thinking, let me ask you to say the one quote again the way you said it, because it really struck me. And it was the one about meeting them where they are, but loving them. How did that go again?
Unconditionally.
Loving them unconditionally. Say meeting them where they are. You meet them where they are, but you love them unconditionally for who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was.
Yeah. For people who are, I guess this is two things, Tim, because we're kind of talking about two different groups of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're struggling with addiction, you're struggling with alcoholism, it doesn't matter what it is, there is a path to recovery. There's not a monopoly on recovery by any one group. And you are the expert on you. But when it comes to recovery, listen to those that have recovered.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a different path. And together you can work together and work your own path to recovery. For those who have people in their lives that are suffering from addiction and alcoholism, Tim, this is a whole different podcast, bro.
Different topic.
Well, God.
Where would someone start if they wanted to help someone? Where would they start?
I mean, there's always AA, NA, CA to get your foot in the door. Detox. The biggest obstacle that I have run into professionally
Mm-hmm.
with families is families don't want to see their loved one in the light that their loved one is in. And so if their loved one ends up in jail, they bail them out of jail. If their loved one doesn't have money, then they give them money. If their loved one... Sometimes those loved ones will recover. Sometimes. A lot of the time, those loved ones are going to die.
That's a pretty sobering thought. No pun intended, actually.
It's nothing that the loved ones, that the individuals with the loved one that's suffering did wrong. Seek help. Don't ever give up on seeking help. Set your boundaries. Don't accept behavior or the lies of the manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to see them out doing what they're doing. But sometimes us loving them closer is killing them faster.
I think that's actually a really good place to leave that. That is a very, very strong statement for those who may be going through this with family members. Kevin, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I really enjoyed it because it really helps me understand more about the joy that you experience in your life now. And the joy with your family, with hunting, with fishing, and it it really helps put into perspective what you've been through in your life to be able to get to experience that joy and those blessings that you have today, and how much you appreciate them. Because, you know, one of the things that I've gotten from you from the first time we talked was an attitude of thankfulness, an attitude of feeling blessed, and an attitude of being very grateful for what you have. And there's probably so many people that forget that and didn't have to, you know, maybe have not gone through addiction, have not gone through alcoholism, but maybe don't often take the time to realize how blessed they really are with what they have, how grateful they could be. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to take that for granted. I get the feeling there's not a day go by where you take what you have for granted.
No.
Yeah.
No, there's days that go by sometimes that I wish I would have more time. Mm-hmm. You know, and we can go down that rabbit hole and be on for another hour, but I'm just the beauty of the green grass and the trees, and watching my son play in his sandbox, or watching my wife crochet or make dinner, just enjoying the little things in life. You know, there's one saying, and this is the truth: don't sweat the small stuff, because it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
It all is. And, you know, the grass is going to get cut. It'll get cut. You know, enjoy the time that you have, because you never know when that time is going to end.
Yeah, when you say the grass is, don't worry about the grass because it's going to get cut. There was about 3 weeks of my house where it didn't. It was bad. I was beginning to wonder if I was going to be able to see the deer in my backyard for the grass not covering them up. Well, we had a little bit of a drought, so parts of my yard were really dry. So I didn't want to mow it to kill it, and that left the other part to get a little high. But when comparing to my neighbor's
yard, we
had
a week straight of rain, and I needed a canoe so I could pull my lawnmower along.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure getting to know more about you. And, you know, part of my reason for doing this is to help provide inspiration for others. And you've inspired me today. You've put things in perspective. And I hope others come out of this that watch that with feeling blessed, feeling grateful, having also a better understanding for those that go through addiction, alcoholism, and what it means to recover, and what they can get out of the recovery, how much nature can help, and getting that enjoyment and appreciation of every day. And if we can just help one person appreciate each day for what it is, I think you and I have done our job on this this video.
One thing, Tim, if there's anybody that sees this that doesn't know where to turn, mm-hmm. You're more than welcome to give them my phone number, and I'll work with them to get resources, and you know, we'll they're not alone, and I don't want them to ever feel like they're alone.
Really appreciate that, and I'll make sure I put that in the comment for the video, that if someone needs help, to message me, and then I'll if they don't know where else to turn, I'll let you know, and then we can make that connection for them. So that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I'll let you get going. Make sure your son doesn't jump off the porch or whatever the heck he's going to do there.
Well, I've got him, I think, in the front room doing something. So Lord only knows.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kevin, and enjoy your holiday week here. And we're recording this on the Sunday right before July 4th. It's going to go up this Friday. And thank you again for your time, and enjoy your holiday week.
Absolutely. And thanks to all the vets. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. If nobody's told you today that they love you, I definitely love you. Semper Fi.
I know they'll appreciate that. All right. Thank you very much, Kevin.
You betcha. Bye-bye.